Hey everybody, this is Christian, founder at b2bscale.io, where we help dozens of entrepreneurs and agency owners add 10K, 20K, and even up to 30K per month to their businesses with our cold emailing system. And the video that you're about to watch is a video that we usually only give to our clients in our course, and it's a small part of our sales course, and it's how to sell through stories. This video was made not by me, but by my business partner, Elias, who's the chief sales officer at our company. And what you're going to learn is how to use stories to get better answers from your prospects, which will then increase your closing rates, how to use what we call tactical vulnerabilities, and a couple of analogies that he tends to use on his sales calls to, again, get better answers from people, which then increases the closing rates. And before you get into the video, if you've enjoyed anything about what you're about to watch, I do want you to know that if you go into the description of this video, you're going to find trainings on how to book more meetings, more trainings on how to close more deals, how to hire people, how to increase your performance as an entrepreneur, and more. So make sure to go watch those as soon as you're done with this video.
All right, so in this video, we're going to be walking through selling through stories, okay? And we're going to cover some of the analogies that I like to use on sales calls. We're also going to dive deep into tactical vulnerability. So what it is, how to use it, and really also how to soften certain questions so that your prospects feel comfortable enough to actually share some of the deeper answers that you need on a sales call, right? That would be in your, like when you're exploring their desired states, and also some of the cost of an action pieces as well. All right. And so why do we even use analogies in the first place? Well, we want to make it super easy for prospects to know why we're asking them certain questions, but we also want to pull on a very powerful psychological lever that is embedded in us since we were, in the cave days. Like if you take, for example, humans that would be traveling in different caves, like you can go back in history and see that they were like painting on walls, doing what? Explaining stories, right? Sharing those stories. If you look at, like, let's say, for example, when you were young enough to hear a bedtime story, right? It's like, that's a story, right? And you want to think about leveraging that on your calls, and I'll show you the exact examples of, what analogies I like to use. But it's something that is really able to allow your prospects to give deeper answers, right? And feel as if it's in their best interest to explain those answers to you, okay? Now, tactical vulnerability, what exactly is it? So tactical vulnerability, it's being vulnerable around a key conceptual belief that you want to get checked off so that the prospect will be more likely to actually be vulnerable with you. And it's almost like a handshake, right? In a way. So it's like, hey, I'm vulnerable with you. I put out my hand, and you're going to be more likely to be what? To be more vulnerable with me. Now, to the same extent, when you first, let's say you take the sale through sales philosophy, you're going through the stages, right? At the very beginning of the call, within 5 to 10 minutes, you don't have that emotional rapport built up enough to be able to ask some of these evasive questions. But when you go further down as you're exploring their desires and cost of an action, you're much more likely to be able to get those answers. And the example I like to give is, if you were to be, like, let's say you and I get on an elevator right now, and I don't know you, and I walk in and I click on floor 3, and then, I turn to you and I go, hey, can you click on, floor 3, whatever it is. And then afterwards, I immediately turn to you and I say, hey, so what's the relationship like with your mother? You're going to be like, whoa, dude, I don't know you at all. Why are you asking me these questions? But if we're stuck in the elevator for 20 minutes, we might just get there, right? And so it's something that, really gives the prospects the ability to feel comfortable enough to open up to you. Okay. And when you tell a really good tactical vulnerability story, what happens is, as people are hearing you explain the story, they actually become the protagonist of the story. A lot of the times when you tell a story, people put themselves in the hero spot, right? And so they're actually internalizing what it is that they're actually going through, which is what you want them to be doing as you go through the process, right? Now, we can also prevent and pre-handle certain objections with the right story as well. So we're going to prevent, let's say we're getting some timing objections, right? Where people are like, I just don't know if I have enough time for this, or financial objections, or maybe fear objections, right? Around jumping into buying something. Well, we're going to handle those here in this stage. Now, my tactical vulnerability story, it's really personalized to you. And then you got to really mold it according to the kind of objections that you might be getting, right? But the intentions with the tactical vulnerability story, at least mine, for example, are to really tell the prospects what happens when I hit my personal goals, right? So what does the money mean for me personally? What does it allow me to do, right? And then I also want to share with them, well, what the consequences are of me not doing anything. Like, what do those look like, right? And so my specific story, let's say I'm going into the ideal states part of the call, right? The desired states, right? And I want to find out, they haven't really expressed what the money means to them just yet. We've asked them, in the next 6 months in their ideal world, where do they want to get to in terms of like monthly revenue or just in general with their business or where they're headed? And they gave us a surface level answer, right? And so I might just say right around there, well, listen, I don't want to bore you to death too much, but I actually got into like my own marketing agency a couple years back, really because I saw a lot of other people doing it. And I was like, you know what, if they can do it, then I can do it too. And one of the biggest things that was obviously driving me forward was the money. Like, obviously that's great, but more importantly, like not just the 50K months, the 60K months, it wasn't really about that. It was really about what the money was going to do for me. And what that looks like is really being able to help my mom. I really wanted to retire her at a young age. And I also wanted to be able to give back to my grandparents, my family, people that had given, to me in life to get me to where I am now. And obviously also be able to travel, maybe live, a remote lifestyle, being able to pick up and not really be tied down to one specific location. And so I know we've kind of explored, what like the revenue goal looks like, but I guess for you, hitting that, let's say 50K per month or 60K or 100K per month that, you said you wanted to get to, I guess, what does that look like for you more personally, right? And so what did I just do? I just shared a bit of what, hitting personal goals means for me so that they can see, and they have a few things to latch onto. If you notice, I mentioned location freedom, right? I mentioned being able to give back, right? I mentioned being able to help out my parents, right? I also mentioned not being tied down anywhere. And those are things that they're noticing, right? As I'm telling the story, they're hearing those things and they're seeing that in their own version of it, right? And so that is where they're going to then open up and say, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Kind of similar to you, Eli, and then they'll start opening up. They'll start voicing what some of their actual goals are looking like for them when they hit their goals in a more personal way. All right, now let's explore the cost of an action. And I'll show you how this all ties in with the analogies here in a moment. But the cost of an action story would be something like this. It's like, hey, listen, I know I kind of explained like what my goals are, but one of the things that I also know is super important to understand is also like, kind of the consequences of what would have happened if I didn't do anything, Like I knew for a fact that whenever I started my marketing agency, because I didn't really go the traditional, college route. And, my grandparents, they were both college professors. My whole family had gone to college, all, in university and get to graduate with great grades. I didn't really go that route. And so for me, I knew that like, obviously I needed to scale the business and be able to chase some of these goals. But more importantly, I knew what I was running from as well. And that was the fear of me not succeeding, right? Every single day I was putting in tons of effort, right? Even if that meant being more uncomfortable than I should be, right? I knew that that was going to be better than having to actually confront the reality of having to go to a family picnic one day if I didn't succeed and having to actually like sit down with my family and say, hey, like I'm a failure, like I'm a disappointment, like I couldn't scale the business, and I just was not willing to settle for that. I couldn't live with that idea. And so I know we've kind of explored, what the goals look like for you, but I guess like it's also really important to understand what the ramifications are if we don't succeed either. And so I guess, and I hate to even ask this because I've enjoyed a lot of what we talked about, but what happens, man, if, I don't know, maybe the next 3 months go by, 6 months, 12 months, you still haven't, cracked your acquisition channels and, you're still where you're at now and you can't actually get to a point where you can, help out the family and do the things you want to do and make the impact you want to make. I guess like, what are the ramifications then? Like what happens then? Right. And because I shared more of what my, story looked like for my cost of actions, they're going to be more likely to share what those ramifications look like for them. Right. And if you notice here, I'm always finishing up the story with a follow-up question to get that deep answer. We can get the surface level, right? Of like, hey, like you want the revenue, cool. But like, what does that mean for you more personally? Now in other industries, right? For example, let's say we're selling TikTok ads to massive, or let's say TikTok content, like done for you content to like a massive e-com brand, multiple 8-figure brand. The founder that you're talking to, like, he understands what you're doing when you're going through, like, let's say, for example, that tactical vulnerability story. And so for someone like that, you would want to explain the tactical vulnerability story for what you know, that type of client is looking to get to in life. And most of the time in these big e-com brands, what do they want to do? They want to exit. They want to use that as a catalyst for other startups. They want to make an impact. They want to grow their team, right? They want to have the best brand out there. And so you would, let's say, share a story and give certain things that allow them to latch onto those different avenues, right? So that they'd be more likely to open up, right? And so it's just going to be based for the industry you're in. That example that I gave earlier was because I was selling to a lot of, marketing agency owners that were looking to either start an agency or keep scaling their agency. And so my story really resonated because I had one myself, right? And I could get those deeper answers because of the fact that I could open up and, I know the route that they go. And so I could really relate and resonate, and more importantly, make them feel comfortable enough to talk about, their goals in detail, and more importantly, the ramifications if they don't succeed, right? That the ramifications, that internal urgency, like if they don't do anything about this, like that eliminates so many think about it objections, because they literally contemplated what those ramifications are and they're not willing to settle for them. And so that allows you to always bring the prospect into the now, meaning they have to do something about solving their problem now so that they don't experience the pain, right? Just paying for your service would save so much of that. So it's far better than waiting for the cost of an action. Okay. So continuing on, right? One way that you can loop and more importantly, tie these tactical vulnerability stories, right, to analogies are the following way. So let's say, for example, you have a few different analogies that you can use. There's the ice cream and burning building analogy, the deer and bear, and also Olympics first place winner versus last place loser. Okay, so I'll break down each of them here in a second. But one thing that you have to keep in mind is that these are really just things that you would keep in your arsenal, right? You don't necessarily have to use an analogy every single time, but it does help the prospect understand a lot of the times why you're asking them. So I'll give an example, right? With the ice cream and burning building. I probably use this one more than any other analogy out there, but I'd say something like this. I'd say, so they would give me their goals. So we actually have already established what the money means for them personally, and I've shared what it means for me, right? And so I'd say something like this. I'd be like, yeah. So the way I kind of see people, running towards their goals is almost like a little kid running towards an ice cream truck. And I know it might be a little bit off topic analogy, but if you picture a kid, on a hot summer day, he hears the jingling of the ice cream truck, he throws on his flip-flops, he runs outside and he's just sprinting towards his ice cream. He's huffing and puffing, he's running super fast, and, he obviously wants to get to that ice cream. Now for us, for me, getting to that ice cream, like I said earlier, was, getting to a point where I could help my family. More importantly, have that remote freedom. Like you said, you want to be able to, take your family on a vacation and maybe have the ability to get that car you want and, just help the family as well. And we can both agree, that's a pretty good ice cream, right? Right. But that same kid, he's not going to run over broken glass. He's not going to push moms and kids out of the way. He's not going to run 50 blocks to get to that ice cream because it's just an ice cream. Right. But then if you look at the other side of it, which is the velocity in which we run away from things, right? It's a completely different velocity. Let's say, for example, you picture someone running out of a burning building, right? The ramifications of them not doing anything are unequal to the other. And so by definition, you've never seen anyone get to the front door of a burning building and go, all right, that's enough running. I'm good. No, they're out. And so I know we've explored what some of these goals mean for you, but I guess to also understand how we can get there faster is to understand what we're running away from. And so, and I don't want to offend you when I ask this at all, but I guess what happens if, I don't know, the next 3-6 months go by, maybe 12 months go by, you're still where you're at now, and you haven't actually gotten to a point where you can outsource, the marketing and be in a position where you can have that time freedom to be able to spend time with the family and give them the life that you said you wanted to give them. I guess what's that burning building look like for you, man? Right? And so we attached the goals to the kid running towards an ice cream, and then we attached the consequences of us not doing anything to the burning building. And so because of that, they see, right, both options, and they're able to elaborate on, okay, he got me to answer this. That's how the prospect's thinking. I just answered the ice cream one, now I got to answer the burning building one. And when you ask them those questions like that and you're vulnerable and you tie in your vulnerability to both of those things, the prospects open up and give you those answers that you're looking for, right? Another example is the deer and the bear analogy. So the deer and the bear analogy is a little bit similar. And I would only use this, again, if I'm not getting super deep answers from them, right? Because when you're in the cost of an action phase and people keep saying things like, well, I'm just going to keep figuring it out. If it doesn't work, then I'll just keep trying, Like, you ask them the consequences of them not doing anything, and they say that, right? And the truth of the matter is, like, if they are going to do anything in the future and like they're just going to keep going, then like they probably would have figured it out up to this point. And so they're not giving you the right answer. They're not giving you the answer you need to hear, right? And hear themselves here so that they can actually stay in the now, right? And not give you a think about an objection. The deer and the bear analogy is something like this. So I want you to picture, like a deer just hanging out, being Bambi, looking all cute, right? He's in the forest, he's just hanging out, eating some leaves. And then all of a sudden, a massive grizzly bear comes out of nowhere and just starts chasing this thing, right? Now, they're off to the races. Bear's chasing the deer. I'm just curious, man, what do you think? Who's giving up first, right? And most people will say, well, probably the bear. And you go, but why though? Like, he's hungry, like he wants to eat, right? And they're going to say, yeah, I mean, that's right. And then you go, well, and you know why the bear gives up first, man? It's because the ramifications, right, of the deer not doing anything are unequal to the bear not doing anything. And so by definition, that deer is going to move way faster. Okay. And I want you to actually picture, like, I'm sure you've seen these people, like, you look at Michael Jordan or you look at, these massive successful entrepreneurs, like you always see them online. Like they're waking up early, doing yoga on the beach at 5 a.m., 12-pack abs, got 3 kids, running a multi-seven-figure business. And you're like, what is that fire in that dude's belly that's driving them to be like such an absolute savage? It's because 10 times out of 10, those people are running away from something with extreme velocity. And so for you, like all BS aside, like, nothing changes, man. Like you stay where you're at now for the next 3, 6, even 12 months. And you still haven't gotten to a point where you can, get to that ideal goal you said you wanted to get to, I guess. Like what happens then? Like, what are the consequences then? Right. And because you painted it, again, in that analogy, you give them context and they're more likely to open up. All right. Now, this third analogy, I actually like to use this towards the end of the call, right? If, let's say, for example, they say that, everything looks good, but they want to just think about it, right? Totally fine, right? We would frame it like this. So we'd say, hey, John, you watch the Olympics, right? Yeah, I watch the Olympics, of course. Who doesn't watch the Olympics, right? Well, I'm fascinated by that stuff. I'm fascinated by the Olympics because, you see these races all the time, You got the people that are in like first place, taking home gold or whatever. And then you got the people in like 8th, 9th, 10th place, last place. And sometimes like the only difference between a lot of these first place winners and people that lose is like 2 seconds, sometimes even 1/10 of a second, right? Between clear winner and clear loser. And I'm sure, John, like you and I, like, we're probably never going to make it to the Olympics. Now, at least I know I'm not, right? But for us, right, the game, the sport of what we do is having a business that does, multiple 7 figures a month or per year, right? And so in life, if we practically want to guarantee ourselves failure, we'll always wait, 1 day, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months to think about things. Now, is the information going to change in that time? No. It just puts us that much further, right, behind our competition and prevents us from getting to where we want to go. And then I'd tie it into like, so what do you feel like you have to do today to put yourself in the best possible position to actually get to your outcome, man? Right? And so we'd tie in like, what they have to do to get their outcome. And it's less about, hey, do you want to do the program or not? More about like, hey, what do you have to do to get to your goals? Right? Because if time is in the way, then like you don't want to be that person that's always in last place. So you get them to understand that. You get them to see those 2 sides of the spectrum to eliminate those objections. Awesome. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but earlier, whenever I asked some of the consequence questions, I actually said, hey, I don't mean to offend you when I ask this, right? Or I hope you don't mind if I ask this, or I really enjoyed a lot of what you're saying here, so I hate to even ask this in the first place. What am I doing? I'm actually softening the question. Another way to soften a question is by saying, like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question, like a personal question, right? They say, no, not at all. And then you ask the question. You're softening the question, right? You want to soften questions whenever you're asking consequence questions, right? And I did it earlier. And again, it just allows you to ask it in a way to where like, they've opened up. They said, sure, yeah, you can ask me a personal question. And then boom, you go for a personal question, right? Hey, I really hate to ask this, since I've really enjoyed a lot of what you've spoken about so far, but and then you go into the question. Or, hey, I don't mean to offend you in any way when I ask this. I mean, I've enjoyed a lot of what we've spoken about and what you've said, but man, I guess like, have you thought about like what the potential, and then you go into your question, right? Ramifications. And so these are really, really key things that you can put into your sales process to really get into those vulnerable states with your customers, with your clients, with the people that you're enrolling. Okay. And always keep in mind that, you having your own story around how you, let's say, overcame fear or overcame, people looking at you and telling you not to do it, and then you did it either way, and then it worked out for you, right? Like those are examples of how you could throw that in, depending on the avatar that you're talking to, right? And so please, like, definitely, if you got value from this, go back and rewatch it. The way that I was going through the process and asking those questions and like tying the actual story to the analogy is very, very key. And the more reps that you get in, the more you practice it, the more you paint your own story, the easier it will be to explain to your prospects, so they'll know exactly what kind of answers you're looking to get from them. So I'll see you guys in the next video. We'll talk soon.
And that is it for Selling Through Stories. If you've enjoyed that video in any way, shape, or form, go in the description where you will find links to our other videos on, again, how to book more meetings, how to close more deals. So even more videos on how to close more deals, how to hire team members, how to increase your performance, and more. So make sure to go watch more videos if you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next video.